Hey guys, tonight we're taking you on a journey you probably wouldn't survive. You're standing on a dimly lit dock somewhere along the southern coast of England. It's late spring in 1944. The salty breeze rolls in off the channel, brushing past the wool of your uniform. You smell damp rope, diesel fuel, and nervous sweat, yours and everyone else's around you. Hundreds of soldiers murmur, shifting their weight, clenching rifles like their lifelines. You can almost hear their thoughts. Will I even see the sunrise? A jeep rumbles by, headlights blacked out. Officers bark last-minute orders that sound more like farewells. Behind you, rows of landing craft rock gently in the dark water like ominous cradles. You glance at the pale sliver of moon overhead and imagine what waits across the channel. You've been told it's the most important mission of the war. You've also been told casually that casualties will be heavy. That's military code for good luck staying alive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far these little bedtime trips travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Asterisk, you stand in line with the rest of your unit, helmet slightly too tight, boots already chafing your heels. There's a strange quietness here, like the world is holding its breath before a punch. In the distance, you can faintly hear the rumble of aircraft. The briefing earlier was all code words and maps smeared with chalk lines. Beaches with names like Utah, Omaha, Juneau, Sword. They sounded almost friendly, like vacation spots. But the sergeant's grim face told you the truth. Nothing waiting there would feel friendly. A chaplain moves slowly down the rows, offering soft words, a blessing, or just a comforting pat on the shoulder. Some soldiers kneel, crossing themselves. Others stare blankly, clutching cigarettes like they're the last luxury they'll ever have. You watch one kid, he can't be more than 19, fumbling with a photo of his sweetheart, the paper edges frayed. He's whispering something you can't hear. You wonder if anyone will even remember your face if you don't come back. It's odd, isn't it? This is supposed to be the biggest, most coordinated military operation in history. You'd think it would feel loud, chaotic, like the movies. But right now, it's just still. Even the seagulls seem to be holding back their cries. That's your first warning sign. Nature itself knows what's coming. A mainstream historical fact. Over 156,000 Allied troops are preparing for this single day, spread across thousands of ships, planes, and vehicles. It's the largest amphibious invasion ever attempted. You're just one tiny piece of this enormous puzzle, a single breath in the storm that's about to be unleashed. But here's a quirky little tidbit. You probably didn't know many soldiers had their pockets stuffed with invasion currency. Yep, actual printed money designed for post-liberation France. Imagine that. You haven't even landed yet, and someone already assumes you'll survive long enough to buy a baguette in Normandy. Optimistic, right? Historians still argue whether General Eisenhower truly believed the plan would succeed on day one, or if he quietly prepared for the worst. Some say he even drafted a note taking full blame for failure, just in case. You can't help but wonder if that kind of doubt seeps down the chain of command. You shift your weight and glance at the water again. The channel looks deceptively calm tonight, like a mirror of dark glass. Somewhere out there beyond the horizon are German bunkers, minefields, and soldiers waiting with rifles aimed where you'll be landing. You're told they have Atlantic wall defenses, Massive concrete fortifications with machine guns ready to shred anything that moves. A nice, welcoming committee. Your stomach growls, reminding you of the mess hall dinner you barely touched. A dry biscuit, a tin of watery stew. Maybe you were too nervous to eat. Maybe your body already knows it doesn't want to carry extra weight. Into the nightmare waiting ahead. Someone cracks a weak joke. Hey, at least the fish are getting free helmets tonight. And a few guys laugh, more out of desperation than amusement. You smile despite yourself. Humor is a fragile lifeline here, like whistling in the dark. The officer in charge shouts for everyone to get their gear ready. Straps tighten, weapons click. You can feel the mood shift. The stillness is replaced by a heavy tension, like the air is physically thicker. Your heart pounds a little faster. One step closer to the boats. One step closer to the unknown. Think about it. Hours from now, you might be huddled behind a steel ramp on a landing craft, salt spray stinging your eyes, knowing that the second the door drops, you'll be sprinting into bullets. Your life will depend on instinct, luck, and the hope that someone else doesn't trip in front of you. The officer moves past you, glancing at each face. He nods curtly. Get some rest, he says, as if that's possible. Around you, some guys try to lie down on their packs, helmets still on, hoping for even a few minutes of restless sleep. Others stare at the horizon like it might offer answers. You keep standing. You can't bring yourself to close your eyes. Not yet. The sea breeze is colder now. Somewhere in the darkness, engines rumble to life. Soon you'll board those landing craft. Soon you'll leave this relative safety for something no training could prepare you for. You take a deep breath, the taste of salt and fear mingling on your tongue. For now, there's nothing left to do but wait. Wait and listen to the ticking clock that's counting down to the moment everything changes. You shuffle forward in the darkness, boots scuffing against the wooden planks of the dock. The line of soldiers inches toward the waiting landing craft, their black silhouettes blending into the night. You can barely make out the shape of the vessel you're boarding. Low, squat, all sharp angles and steel, designed purely for function, not comfort. The air smells of oil and brine, and a faint mist hangs over the water, clinging to your uniform like a warning. The crewmen help you aboard, their faces pale and expressionless. You step carefully over the narrow gangway and into the belly of the craft. It feels cramped already, with rows of benches lining the walls and no room to stretch your legs. Men pack in shoulder to shoulder, their rifles awkwardly wedged between their knees. The metal floor is cold, and you can hear the hollow echo of every footstep. It's almost like you've stepped into a coffin with an engine. A few guys try to whisper, but their voices are swallowed by the groaning hull and the soft slap of waves against the sides. You sit, helmet tilted forward, fingers gripping the strap of your gear bag like it might keep you grounded. It doesn't. Then, with a sudden lurch, the landing craft shudders to life. The engine roars, and the smell of diesel thickens. You feel the vibrations run through the steel and into your bones as the boat begins to move away from the safety of the dock. You glance out through the narrow gap above the ramp at the front. The shore is disappearing. England is behind you. Ahead is only darkness. That the channel is deceptively calm at first. The waves rock the craft gently, like a mother rocking a child. It would almost be soothing if not for the tension knotting every muscle in your body. The soldiers next to you grip their helmets, silently praying the crossing stays smooth. You've heard rumors some crossings have been rough, with boats tossing violently, soldiers puking all over themselves before they even reach the beach. One guy near the stern cracks a nervous grin. "Well," he says softly, "at least the fish get dinner first if we tip over." A weak laugh follows, more like a sigh. Humor, a genge, a flimsy bandage over the gaping wound of dread. A mainstream historical fact. The beaches you're headed toward, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, Sordar, each assigned to different Allied forces, carefully chosen based on tides, terrain, and proximity to strategic towns. Omaha, where many American troops will land, is the most heavily fortified, if you're unlucky enough to be assigned there. You're walking straight into the jaws of hell. Your boat is one of thousands now churning through the dark waters. You can't see them all, but you feel the presence of the fleet. A living machine of war stretching across the sea. Warships, destroyers, and transports move in silent procession. Somewhere behind you, the big guns of battleships are ready to unleash fire on the coast. But for now, it's just the endless thrum of engines and the quiet, uneasy breathing of the men crammed into the same steel box as you. Here's a quirky little tidbit before the invasion. Some landing crafts were painted with strange, wavy, black and white stripes, dazzle camouflage, meant to confuse enemy spotters about their speed and direction. So, if you're about to die on a beach, at least you're riding there in what looks like a giant zebra. Comforting, right? Historians still argue whether the decision to launch the invasion on June 6 was the best tactical call. Weather reports were dicey, tides were tricky, and the German defenses were still formidable. Some claim it was a calculated risk. Others say it was just barely better than waiting another month. Either way, you're here now. The waves grow rougher as you push farther from shore. The boat bucks and twists. You feel your stomach lurch. A soldier opposite you leans over, clutching his gut, and vomits into his helmet. He doesn't even try to aim for the edge. The smell spreads instantly, thick and sour, mixing with the fuel fumes. You gag, but try to keep it down. Someone pulls a small tin of chewing gum from his pocket and passes pieces around. It doesn't help much, but it gives your mouth something to do besides tremble. Another guy pulls out a letter from his breast pocket and stares at it like he's memorizing every word for the last time. You don't have any letters. You didn't know what to say. Time stretches. Minutes feel like hours. The craft keeps bouncing, rocking, sliding over the waves. Your body aches from holding yourself stiff. You want to stand, to stretch, but you can't. There's nowhere to go. Suddenly, a distant boom echoes across the water. Then another, and another, and another. The horizon flashes faintly as the Allied battleships open fire on the German defenses. The entire sea seems to vibrate under the onslaught. The soldiers around you sit straighter. Some grip their rifles tighter. Others close their eyes, like maybe they can will themselves somewhere else. You peek out again. In the distance, you see the faint glow of the Normandy coast. For a moment, its beautiful rolling hills and soft light through the mist. You almost forget there are machine guns waiting for you there. Almost that the noise builds as you draw closer. You can hear planes droning overhead, bombs dropping, the sharp crack of anti-aircraft fire. You imagine paratroopers already on the ground, scattered across fields and villages, trying to regroup under enemy fire. You wonder if any of them have survived the drop. The landing craft suddenly slows. The engine roars lower, and the rocking shifts to a choppy sway. The coxswain shouts something you can't hear over the din. The ramp in front of you rattles slightly with each wave, and then, without warning, the boat jerks violently. You slam into the soldier next to you. Someone yells. A wave crashes over the side. soaking your boots with icy seawater. Another soldier starts to panic, clawing at his straps. Two others grab him, forcing him to sit. "Steady," the coxswain shouts. But it's hard to feel steady when you know what's next. You're about to reach the beach. The real nightmare is about to begin. The landing craft groans as it pushes closer to shore, each wave slamming against the steel hull with a hollow thud. You grip the bench tighter. Your palms are slick with sweat, though the air is freezing. The smell of the sea mixes with fuel, fumes, and the sharp tang of furin, oddly metallic scent that clings to your throat. Through the narrow opening at the front ramp, you finally glimpse the Normandy coastline. At first glance, it looks deceptively peaceful, a stretch of pale sand backed by dark green bluffs and a few scattered buildings. But then your eyes adjust, and you see the jagged obstacles jutting from the surf rows of wooden stakes tipped with mines, angular steel-check hedgehogs designed to rip landing craft apart, and coiled barbed wire glistening in the damp morning light. Beyond them, faint but unmistakable, are the low silhouettes of German bunkers, quiet for now but waiting. The boat rocks again, harder this time. You hear the voice of the coxswain yelling over the engine noise. 2 minutes. His tone is clipped, emotionless. 2 minutes until the ramp drops. 2 minutes until you leave the relative safety of this floating steel box for the exposed beach where machine guns are already zeroed in. Someone across from you starts muttering a prayer. Another soldier, trying to sound tough, jokes weakly. "Well, at least the sand's softer than England." No one laughs. A mainstream historical fact. The Germans fortified these beaches with over 4 million mines, countless obstacles, and interlocking machine gun nests. They called it the Atlantic Wall, designed to repel any Allied invasion. Rommel himself, the Desert Fox, had inspected these defenses. And yet, here you are, about to charge straight into them. You suddenly remember a briefing detail. Those hedgehog obstacles out there. They're rigged to explode if a boat hits them at high tide. Which means the timing of this landing, this exact moment, has been calculated down to the minute to give you the best, or at least less deadly, chance. Still, you can't help but think the ocean itself is on the enemy's side. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some soldiers were issued inflatable Mae West life jackets, named after the curvy actress because of how they puffed up. The dark humor wasn't lost on anyone. You're wearing a flotation device, nicknamed after a movie star, while heading into a beach filled with explosives. How glamorous. Historians still argue whether the German commanders truly believed Normandy would be the main invasion site. Many expected the Allies to land further north at Pas de Calais. That miscalculation might be the only reason you're not already facing double the enemy force. The coxswain yells again. 1 minute. Your stomach tightens into a knot. Around you, soldiers tighten their chin straps, adjust their packs, and grip their rifles so hard their knuckles turn white. The guy next to you pulls out a small medallion from under his shirt and kisses it. Another one stares at the floor like it might open up and swallow him whole. The boat suddenly lurches to a halt with a bone-rattling crunch. You've hit the shallows. The ramp rattles under a soldier's boot as he braces himself. A moment of eerie stillness hangs in the air, and then bang. The first German shell lands in the water nearby, sending a towering plume of spray over the boat. You flinch as cold seawater drenches you. Another shell lands closer, then machine gun fire rattles in the distance, the sound of steel teeth chewing through the morning calm. Go, 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 the coxswain screams. The ramp drops with a metallic slam, revealing a nightmare tableau. The beach stretches wide and flat, dotted with bodies already floating in the tide. Bullets snap through the air in deadly zips. Sand erupts in tiny geysers where machine gun rounds hit. You hesitate for a fraction of a second. Then the soldier in front of you charges out. He makes it 3 steps before collapsing, his pack dragging him sideways into the surf. You're moving now, your boots splashing into knee-deep water. The icy shock steals your breath. Around you, men stumble, trip, and fall. Some don't get back up. The sound is overwhelming gunfire, shouting, the whoosh of incoming shells, the thunderous explosions ripping through the obstacles on the beach. You duck instinctively, but there's nowhere to hide. The hedgehog obstacles give minimal cover. A soldier to your right tries to crouch behind one, only for a bullet to ricochet off the steel and graze his helmet. He doesn't get a second chance. You push forward, legs heavy with water and gear. Each step feels like a mile. Your lungs burn. Your ears ring. You hear someone screaming for a medic, but the voice is quickly drowned by the roar of another explosion. You finally reach a half-submerged obstacle and press yourself against it. The metal is slick with seawater. It doesn't feel safe, just slightly less exposed. You glance back at the boat. It's already reversing, retreating into the waves to pick up another load of soldiers. Behind it, another craft explodes in a burst of fire and debris, torn apart by a mine. Somehow, through the chaos, you catch glimpses of the bluffs ahead. German bunkers are firing relentlessly, their muzzles flashing. You can't even see the soldiers inside, just the flicker of death coming from concrete holes. Nearby, an officer is shouting, waving his arm to signal men to push forward. His voice is hoarse but determined. He sprints ahead a few steps before collapsing, cut down. Mid-command. You realize there's no turning back. You have to keep moving. As you push on, your foot catches on something beneath the water. You glance down and instantly wish you hadn't titsed the lifeless face of a soldier from the first wave. Eyes glassy, helmet half off. You force yourself to step past him. Someone throws a smoke grenade ahead, and for a brief moment, the beach is veiled in a thin white haze. It's not perfect cover, but it's something. Soldiers around you surge forward into it, disappearing like ghosts. You follow, heart pounding. Bullets hiss through the smoke, thudding into the sand inches away. Your boots finally hit dry ground beyond the surf, and you throw yourself behind a low rise in the sand. Gasping, you made it off the boat. You're still alive for now, but ahead lies the open stretch of beach, the barbed wire, and the climb toward the cliffs, and the Germans are still waiting. You press yourself into the sand, every muscle screaming to stay flat and invisible. The noise is deafening. Machine guns chatter in relentless bursts, cutting through the air like giant sewing machines, stitching death across the beach. Mortar rounds arc overhead, exploding in dull, stomach-shaking thumps that spray sand, water, and sometimes worse. Your helmet feels suddenly too heavy. It slides forward with each breath, the chin strap digging into your throat. You can taste grit between your teeth from the fine mist of pulverized sand swirling around. You risk a glance upward. The bluffs loom like silent predators, dotted with dark openings, the German bunkers. That's where the gunfire is coming from. Like a hive of angry hornets you can't swat. Beside you, a soldier is fumbling with wire. Cutters his hands, trembling as he tries to crawl toward a tangle of barbed wire stretched just beyond this thin lip of cover. His gear snags on the sandbag tied to his belt. He yanks too hard. The bag tears. Bullets rake the ground near him, and he freezes like a rabbit in an open field. Your officer, if you can still call him that in this chaos, crouches nearby, trying to yell instructions. Push forward. We've got to reach the seawall. But his voice is shredded by the din of combat. He points toward the wire, then motions toward a gap in the sand where a small group of men is crawling toward the next patch of cover. You know that moving means exposing yourself again. You know staying means eventually getting pinned down and killed. The German defenses are brutally efficient. Concrete bunkers with narrow slits, called embrasures, allow the enemy to fire in overlapping arcs that cover every inch of sand. Their heavy MG-42 machine guns can spit out over 1,000 rounds a minute. If you're unlucky enough to stand, even for a second, you're just another silhouette to be shredded. A mainstream historical fact. Those bunkers were part of what Rommel believed to be an impregnable Atlantic wall. He'd ordered the beaches sown with mines, obstacles, and anti-tank traps. The Germans even flooded nearby fields inland, turning them into marshes to trap paratroopers. They expected this invasion, but not quite here, not quite today. And here's a strange, almost absurd details. Some bunkers were stocked with rations, like French wine and local cheeses. German soldiers in those pillboxes were sitting in relative comfort, sipping half-decent Chardonnay between bursts of machine gun fire. Meanwhile, you're out here eating sand and praying your limbs stay attached. Historians still argue whether the Germans could have pushed you back entirely if they'd had quicker reinforcements that morning. Some say Hitler's insistence on personally approving tank movements delayed their response by crucial hours. Lucky for you, maybe your officer gives the signal. It's time to move. You take a deep breath, sucking in a lungful of salty air and adrenaline, and then you're crawling. Hands and knees dig into the gritty sand as you inch forward toward the barbed wire. You keep your head low. Bullets snap overhead, sounding like angry bees. One kicks up a spray of sand an inch from your helmet. You don't stop. The barbed wire is close now, jagged loops stretched across the beach like the claws of some metal beast. The soldier with the cutters finally makes it, panting. He positions the tool carefully, clips one strand, and starts on the next. A burst of machine gun fire tears into him before he finishes. He collapses silently, cutters still in hand. You freeze then, out of nowhere, a bang. A blast from behind. Usamans tossed a Bangalore torpedo, a long pipe packed with explosives. It slides under the wire with a hiss and detonates, ripping open a gap in the obstacle. The explosion leaves your ears ringing and your face peppered with sand. Through the haze of smoke and dust, someone yells, "Go!" Now you scramble forward through the gap. The smoke offers a fleeting shield. You sprint or try to. Your boots sink in the sand, heavy with water. Your pack feels like it's dragging you backward. You hear yourself wheezing, gasping, but you don't stop. Ahead is the seawall, a low concrete barrier offering the first real cover on this killing ground. You throw yourself against it and collapse into a crouch. Around you, more soldiers are piling up, panting, their faces pale under grime and sweat. The wall doesn't feel safe, but it's better than nothing. You press your back against the cold concrete and peek around the edge. The view is hellish. More obstacles, more wire, more sand, and beyond that, the bluffs. You can see flashes of gunfire from the bunkers embedded in the cliffs. A soldier next to you is shaking uncontrollably. He pulls out a crumpled photo from his pocket, kisses it once, then tucks it back away. Another pulls a grenade from his belt, checking it with mechanical precision. Everyone is waiting for the next move, hearts hammering in unison. And then you hear A tan, unearthly scream in the sky. Incoming artillery. Shells slam into the beach beyond the wall, tossing up geysers of sand and debris. One hits an obstacle directly, sending shards of steel flying like shrapnel. The shock wave punches through your chest. You grip the wall tighter, trying not to panic. The officer crouches again, shouting over the noise. "We need to get up the bluff." He gestures toward a narrow path where the smoke is thicker, maybe offering some cover. "Move in twos." You glance up the bluff. It's steep, muddy, and crawling with enemy fire. The idea of climbing it feels absurd. But staying here isn't an option either. You nod, numb lie. You and another soldier lock eyes. Without speaking, you both know it's time. You dash from the seawall, heading for the base of the bluff. Bullets kick up puffs of dirt around your feet. You slip once, your pack dragging you down. But the other soldier hauls you back up. Somehow, you reach the base of the cliff. You press yourself against the wet earth, panting, ears ringing. Now comes the climb. Your fingers dig into the soil. As you start to pull yourself upward, mud slides under your grip. Boots scrape for purchase. Above, the Germans are still firing, but you're too close to the cliff face for them to angle their guns easily. Halfway up, you hear a shouter soldier, loses his grip and tumbles back down, hitting the sand with a sickening thud. You don't look back. You keep climbing, muscles screaming. Finally, you reach the top. You haul yourself over the edge, gasping, and roll into the grass. The view up here is dizzying. You can see the entire beach below, dotted with smoke, craters, and tiny, moving figures. You made it off the beach, but the bunkers are still ahead, and inside them, the enemy waits. You lie flat on the damp grass at the top of the bluff, chest heaving. The air here smells different, less salt, more smoke and earth. You dare a glance back at the beach. It's a churned-up nightmare of sand, barbed wire, and scattered figures. Tiny landing craft still spill men into the surf below, and the constant stutter of machine guns rolls up like a horrible, endless drumbeat. But here, on the crest, there's a strange, fleeting silence. It feels wrong, like the calm before a storm. Then, a sharp crack snaps past your ear. You flatten instantly, heart hammering. Sniper fire. The Germans know you're up here. Ahead of you, nestled into the hillside like concrete tumors, are the bunkers. They look squat and unassuming, but inside those dark mouths are the machine guns that shredded the beach. Narrow slits cut through their walls, angled just enough to cover every approach. You can't see the soldiers inside, but you can feel their presence. The officer crawling next to you gestures toward one of the pillboxes. "We've got to clear that first," he whispers, though the noise of battle makes it almost absurd to speak quietly. He signals a small group of men of you to flank left, using the low hedgerows as cover. You nod, though your hands are already trembling. A mainstream historical fact, many of these bunkers were interconnected by underground tunnels, allowing German troops to move between firing positions without ever exposing themselves. They could vanish from one pillbox and reappear in another, making it feel like you were fighting ghosts. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some German soldiers inside those bunkers were reportedly listening to propaganda music on phonographs between bursts of gunfire. Imagine that. You're outside crawling through mud and blood, and they're in there, nodding along to some cheerful accordion tune. Historians still argue whether the bunkers were undermanned on DA Day because of overconfidence. In the Calais defense, some say if they'd been fully staffed, you wouldn't have made it this far at all. You belly crawl forward, careful to stay low. The hedgerows are thicker than you expected. their roots tangling into the wet earth like skeletal fingers. They offer some concealment, but you still feel painfully exposed. Every twig that snaps under your elbow sounds like a gunshot. Suddenly, a grenade rolls out of the grass, a head German, small and potato-shaped. Time slows. You throw yourself sideways, pressing your face into the mud. The explosion thumps, deafening, but mercifully not close enough to shred you. Dirt rains down on your helmet. The soldier next to you curses under his breath, then lobs a grenade of his own toward the slit in the bunker. A muffled boom follows, but the machine gun inside doesn't stop firing. You can see the muzzle flash spitting defiantly from the darkness. The officer signals again. It's time to rush the pillbox. You and 2 others break from the hedgerow and sprint toward the concrete hulk. Your boots slip in the wet grass, but you keep going. Bullets whip past, close enough that you can hear them crack the air. You reach the blind side of the bunker and press your back against its cold, rough wall. You're so close now, you can hear the enemy inside shouting, the clatter of spent shell casings hitting the floor. You yank the pin on your grenade, count to 2, and shove it through the firing slit. You duck and brace. The explosion rocks the bunker. Dust and smoke billow from the narrow opening. Then, silence. You and your team push forward, cautiously stepping into the dark entrance. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and something else, burnt oil, gunpowder, and a coppery tang you recognize instantly, but wish you didn't. The concrete walls are scarred with soot. A twisted MG-42 lies silent on its tripod. The soldiers who were firing it are sprawled, lifeless, their helmets rolling away like discarded toys. You swallow hard and move on beyond the first bunker. The hillside is dotted with more fortifications, some still firing, others ominously quiet. Each one will have to be taken the same way. Grenades, close quarters, fighting sheer nerve. You regroup outside with the others. Your officer points toward another pillbox up the slope. Same thing, he says. His voice is steady, but his eyes are bloodshot. As you advance again, you notice the terrain. Normandy's fields are divided by ancient hedgerows, thick walls of earth and roots built up over centuries. They make perfect natural cover for both sides. You can't see more than a few feet ahead, and every corner feels like an ambush, waiting to happen. Halfway up the slope, you hear shouting, this time in German. A burst of gunfire sprays through the hedgerow, inches above your head. You drop flat, heart pounding. The soldier next to you fires blindly into the greenery, hoping to hit something. A moment later, 2 German soldiers appear, young and terrified, rifles trembling in their hands. You don't think, you just squeeze the trigger. Your rifle bucks, and they fall. You're shaking, but you can't stop. There's no time to process. You push forward, one step at a time. The second bunker is harder. It's better positioned, with overlapping fire from a nearby trench. You and your team crawl along the side, using the hedgerows again for cover. A grenade goes in, but the enemy fires back before it explodes, forcing you to retreat briefly. Finally, someone with a flamethrower moves in, crouching low. The hiss of igniting fuel is strangely quiet before the sudden whoosh of fire fills the pillbox. The screams inside are brief. You step past the smoldering opening, eyes averted. You don't want to look. As you move farther inland, you start seeing abandoned German weapons, helmets, ammo belts. Some positions are empty, hastily evacuated. Others are not. For a brief moment, the hillside quiets. You can hear birds, again warily, chirping from the trees, like they're testing if it's safe to sing. You look back toward the beach, now hazy with smoke. Reinforcements are still coming ashore, their figures tiny in the distance. You've made progress, you've taken ground, but there are more bunkers ahead, more trenches, more Germans waiting. The thought creeps in like a shadow. If this is just the first few hours, how will you possibly survive the rest of the day? You pause for a moment in the lee of a hedgerow, gasping for air. The morning mist has turned into a swirling haze of smoke and gunpowder. Your throat is dry, coated with the bitter taste of cordite. Around you, the terrain is a patchwork of fields, hedges, and small farm paths, quaint countryside, turned into a deadly maze. The hedgerows are deceptive. From afar, they look like harmless, overgrown bushes. Up close, they're dense walls of packed earth and ancient roots, taller than a man and impossible to see through. They offer cover, but also trap you in tight, blind corners. Each time you push past one, you feel like you're stepping into a loaded mousetrap. You crouch low, rifle ready, and listen. For a moment, you can almost convince yourself it's quiet. Then you hear the muffled pop, pop, pop of a distant machine gun and the sharp crack of a sniper's rifle. Somewhere beyond the hedges, the Germans are still dug in. The officer ahead motions for everyone to move. You slip into a narrow path between two hedgerows, mud sucking at your boots. It's damp and shadowed. Like walking through a tunnel of green, you can smell the churned earth, mixed with the faint sourness of manure from nearby farms. A mainstream historical fact, Normandy's hedgerow country, known as bocage, was centuries old, created to mark farmland boundaries. During D-Day, these natural barriers turned into lethal traps that slowed Allied movement and gave German defenders perfect ambush points. Tanks struggled to navigate them, and infantry had to fight yard by yard. Here's a quirky tidbit: the cows. Yes, the cows. Some Normandy fields were still full of them, calmly chewing grass while soldiers crawled past. More than one nervous GI reportedly froze at the sound of a moo in the mist, thinking it was an enemy. Imagine crouching in terror, only to find yourself staring into the blank eyes of a very unimpressed cow. Historians still argue whether the Allies underestimated the tactical nightmare of the bocage. Some say better planning for this terrain could have saved hundreds of lives. Others believe there was no real way to prepare for such claustrophobic fighting. You reach a bend in the hedgerow path and stop. There's movement ahead, shadows shifting you, tense finger hovering on the trigger. Then a whisper, friendly. Two soldiers from another unit emerge, faces smeared with dirt. They're just as rattled as you are. One of them jerks his thumb back the way they came. German. Patrols up ahead. Maybe a dozen of them. The officer signals silently. Flank them. Take them out before they can regroup. You and 3 others crawl through a gap in the hedge, belly to the wet ground. The earthy smell of roots fills your nose. Through the leaves, you spot the German patrol. They're moving cautiously, rifles at the ready, scanning the path. They look young, too young. You wait for the signal. It comes, a quick hand motion. Your team opens fire. The Germans scatter. Some dive for cover, others drop instantly. Return fire zips past your head, snapping branches. You press flat against the earth, heart pounding. Another grenade flies through the air and lands among the patrol. The explosion echoes through the hedgerows, shaking loose dirt and leaves. Silence follows. You push forward, stepping over tangled roots and bodies. There's no time to linger. The officer gestures toward a small farmhouse, visible through the smoke in the distance. We're taking that as a staging point, he says. The farmhouse is surrounded by more hedges, its whitewashed walls chipped and scarred by stray bullets. As you approach, the air grows tense again. This could be a trap. Sure enough, a shot rings out from an upstairs window. A sniper. You dive behind a low stone wall as the bullet slams into the ground where you were standing seconds ago. Another soldier isn't so lucky. He crumples silently. You grit your teeth, peering over the wall. The sniper's barrel glints in the sunlight. You can't stay pinned here. One of your squad mates pulls a rifle grenade from his kit, clips it on, and fires. The grenade arcs gracefully, smashes into the window, and detonates. The sniper fire stops. You breach the farmhouse cautiously. Inside, it smells of damp wood and stale bread. There are overturned chairs, a broken table, and scattered personal belongings. Someone lived here once. A photograph lies cracked on the floor. A smiling family, now long gone or hiding in the hills. You clear the rooms quickly. Upstairs, the sniper is slumped in the corner, rifle still clutched in his hands. He's barely older than you. You swallow hard and look away. Outside, the farmhouse offers a brief reprieve. You take the chance to drink from your canteen. The water is lukewarm, but it feels like heaven on your parched throat. You glance toward the horizon. Smoke is rising from multiple points inland. The sound of battle is everywhere, sometimes distant, sometimes alarmingly close. You don't get long to rest. Another runner arrives, panting. Orders are in. We're pushing toward the next strong point. We have to link up with the paratroopers. Paratroopers. You picture them scattered across fields and villages since the night before, cut off from the main force. Some are probably still lost, hiding in barns or ditches. Others are already fighting their own desperate battles against the same defenders you're facing as you move out again. The weather begins to shift. Clouds roll in, casting the countryside into a dim, gray half-light. A drizzle starts, cold and fine, making your rifle slick in your hands. The mud underfoot grows heavier, clinging to your boots. You reach another hedgerow. Beyond it, you can hear German voices, laughter, casual, unaware you're so close. It's strange to hear laughter in this place. It feels wrong. The officer signals for a silent takedown. Two soldiers slip through the hedge quietly, bayonets fixed. A muffled scuffle, then silence again. You push through the hedge and see the enemy outpost, a makeshift camp with rifles leaning against a log. A few soldiers now motionless on the ground. It's eerie how quickly the danger passes. One moment, you're inches from death. The next, it's over, and you're moving on. You keep going, step by muddy step, through the bocage. Every turn looks the same. Every path feels like it might lead straight into another ambush. You're constantly on edge, waiting for the next crack of a rifle or the hiss of an incoming mortar. And then, through the haze and rain, you see it, the faint outline of another German bunker. On the far side of a clearing, smoke curls from its firing slit. It's still active. You take a deep breath. Another strong point, another fight, and the day isn't even halfway over. You crouch at the edge of the clearing, eyes fixed on the bunker, squatting like a concrete beast on the far side. Its narrow firing slit flashes sporadically with muzzle fire, spitting death into the fields beyond. A few charred hedgerows mark where others have already tried and failed to take it. The rain has picked up, turning the clearing into a slick, muddy soup. Every movement is slower now, heavier. You can feel the damp seeping through your uniform, chilling you from the inside out. The smell of wet earth mixes with cordite and something acrid, burnt rubber, maybe from a vehicle that didn't make it past this point. The officer whispers, his voice low but urgent. We can't stay pinned here. We've got to flank it. He points to a narrow ditch running along the left side of the clearing. It might provide some cover, or it might lead you straight into another ambush, a mainstream historical fact. Many of these bunkers, known as Tobruk pits or wider resistance nests, were designed to cover each other. Taking one often meant another was already waiting to rake you with crossfire. This wasn't just random defense. It was a carefully engineered web of kill zones. Here's a quirky little detail, they say. Some German defenders kept pigeons in these bunkers, trained to carry messages if radios failed. So somewhere, a confused little bird might be circling above all this carnage, waiting for a command that would never come. Historians still argue whether the Allied commanders underestimated just how interlocked these strongpoints were. Some believe the planners expected the naval bombardment to neutralize most of the defenses. But in reality, many survived intact, making the landings even bloodier. You belly crawl into the ditch, the mud oozing under your chest. It's cold and slimy, clinging to your sleeves like glue. You inch forward, your rifle slung tight against your body. Behind you, 2 others follow. The sound of the bunker's machine gun is louder now, a relentless metal heartbeat halfway. Along the ditch, you freeze. There's a faint rustle ahead. Your breath catches. Slowly, you peer over the edge. 2 German soldiers are crouched by the bunker's side entrance, their rifles resting against the wall as they talk quietly. They're distracted, unaware you're just yards away. Your heart hammers. This is your chance. You give a quick hand signal. The soldier behind you nods, pulls the pin on a grenade, and lobs it silently toward the side entrance. It lands with a soft thud. The explosion is deafening in the confined space. Dirt and smoke billow from the side of the bunker. The 2 soldiers don't even have time to scream. Before the dust settles, you're moving. You rush the side door, boots slipping in the mud. Inside, it's dark, close, and reeks of oil and damp concrete. Shadows flicker in the dim light. You hear shouts in German from deeper inside the bunker. You toss another grenade down the narrow corridor. It explodes with a dull boom, shaking the walls. The noise inside your helmet is deafening when you step in. Rifle raised, the machine gun is silent. The defenders are sprawled around their weapon, the smell of smoke and blood thick in the stagnant air. You don't linger. You emerge on the far side of the bunker, breathing hard. The clearing is suddenly quiet, except for the distant rattle of gunfire from other positions. One more strong point cleared, one tiny step forward. But there's no time to rest. The officer points toward a rise in the land ahead. Beyond it lies a small hamlet, just a cluster of stone houses and a church steeple visible through the mist. That's our next objective, he says. The crossroads there. The hamlet looks peaceful from here, almost picturesque, but you know better. If the Germans are holding it, every window could hide a sniper. Every alley could be mined. As you approach, you see the damage. Shell craters pock the fields. A farmhouse has collapsed in on itself, smoke still curling from its ruined roof. You pass a dead cow bloated in the rain, its blank eyes staring into nothing. The smell makes you gag. You reach the outskirts of the hamlet and take cover behind a low wall. The streets are eerily quiet. Somewhere, a dog is barking a sharp, lonely sound that echoes unnaturally in the silence. The officer signals for scouts. 2 soldiers slip into the nearest building, weapons ready. After a tense minute, they wave you forward. Inside the house, it feels strange. There's a table set for breakfast, plates still on it, cups half full of cold coffee. A child's toy lies abandoned on the floor. Whoever lived here left in a hurry, or worse, they didn't make it out. You move cautiously through the hamlet. A church bell, cracked and silent, looms overhead. Beyond it, you hear faint German voices. They're holding the crossroads. You set up behind a broken wall, peering at the intersection. There's a machine gun nest at the far corner. Sandbags piled high. A half-tracked vehicle sits nearby, its gun crew scanning the road. This won't be easy. The officer calls for fire support. Somewhere behind you, an Allied mortar crew adjusts their sights. After a tense few moments, you hear the distant thump of a shell being fired. It lands near the crossroads, exploding in a plume of dust and debris. The German soldiers scatter. You and your team seize the moment, sprinting across the narrow street. Bullets whip past, but you make it to the next building. Room by room. You clear the houses. Doors splinter. Grenades detonate. Shouting echoes through stone hallways. It's brutal, claustrophobic fighting. Every shadow feels like it could move. Every creak of the floorboards makes your trigger finger twitch. Finally, you breach the building overlooking the crossroads. From here, you can see the German machine gun crew trying to regroup. You line up your rifle and squeeze the trigger. The gunner jerks, then slumps over his weapon. The others scatter. The crossroads is yours. You take a moment to breathe, leaning against the cold stone wall. Through the cracked window, you see the hamlet quiet again. Smoke drifts lazily from the damaged buildings, but you know this quiet is temporary. Beyond this village, there are more defenses, more bunkers, more fields to fight through. You look around at your squad, mud-caked, hollow-eyed, but still moving. You wonder how many of them will still be here by nightfall. The officer checks his map and mutters, "Next stop, the main road." You glance at the sky. The rain has eased slightly, but clouds still hang low and gray. The day drags on, and you realize you're still just in the opening phase of D-Day. You sit for a fleeting moment on the edge of the ruined house, boots dangling over shattered tiles. The crossroads below is eerily still now, a smoking skeleton of what it was a few hours ago. The drizzle has stopped, but the air remains heavy and damp. You can almost feel the weight of the whole operation pressing down on you. But there's no pause long enough to really catch your breath. The officer folds his map, tucks it into his jacket, and says the words you're starting to dread. "We move now. Your next objective is the main road beyond the hamlet. If the Allies secure it, they can bring in tanks and heavier supplies. Without it, you'll be stuck, isolated in this patchwork of hedgerows and fields. You know what that means: more marching, more ambushes, and more killing before you even reach the road. You follow your squad out of the village. The road leading away is a narrow dirt lane flanked by tall hedgerows. It feels like walking into a funnel, and your gut twists. The fields are quiet, except for the soft drip of water falling from the hedge leaves. Birds circle overhead, restless and skittish. A mainstream historical fact: in these early hours of D-Day, units were often scattered, disorganized, and fighting without clear lines. Radios failed, runners got lost, and sometimes soldiers didn't even know if they were advancing in the right direction. Entire companies wandered off course through the Normandy bocage. You could be fighting alone and not realize friendly troops were just a hedgerow away. Here's a quirky little detail: many American soldiers carried crickets, tiny metal clickers they'd use to identify each other in the dark. One click meant friend. Two clicks back meant friend. Imagine that. In the middle of the biggest invasion in history, you're relying on a little toy clicker to make sure you don't shoot your own side. Historians still argue whether the confusion of those first hours helped or hurt the overall operation. Some say it made the Germans think the Allies had landed in even greater numbers. Others believe it cost precious lives and time. You march slowly down the dirt lane. The hedgerows are thick here, casting deep shadows that make your nerves twitch. Every rustle in the leaves sounds like someone moving. You grip your rifle tighter, scanning for movement. Suddenly, a shot cracks. The soldier ahead of you crumples silently. Instinctively, you drop to the ground. Sniper, someone hisses. The squad scatters, pressing into the ditch along the lane. You scan the hedgerow for a glint of metal or a flicker of movement. Another shot. Bark splinters off a tree near your head. Your officer signals toward a flanking route. Two soldiers slip off the road, crawling through the ditch to find a way around. Minutes crawl by. Then, a distant burst of rifle fire. Silence, clear, comes the call. You move again, more cautiously this time. The sniper's body lies slumped in a hollow of the hedgeboy, really barely old enough to shave. His rifle, still clutched in his pale hands. You force yourself not to look too long as you continue. The road begins to widen. You hear something strange, ahead a low, rhythmic rumble. At first, you think it's thunder. Then you realize it's the sound of armored vehicles on the move. Your squad freezes. The officer signals for everyone to get off the road. You scramble into the hedgerow, flattening yourself against the dirt. The rumble grows louder. Through a gap in the leaves, you see them. A column of German half-tracks and a light tank rolling slowly down the road. Their engines hum ominously, and soldiers ride on top, rifles casually slung. You hold your breath. The tank stops briefly, its turret swiveling lazily as if sniffing the air for trouble. One of the German soldiers hops down, lighting a cigarette, and leaning casually against the vehicle. He exhales smoke, unaware you're just a few feet away, your finger tight on the trigger. The officer holds up his hand, signaling wait. Taking on a tank with rifles would be suicide. You let the column pass, your heartbeat pounding in your ears. Finally, after what feels like forever, the vehicles rumble away down the lane. When the sound fades, you crawl out of the hedgerow, legs shaking. You've avoided one disaster, but the road ahead just got more dangerous. Your squad moves again, now cutting through a field to bypass the armored patrol. The ground is soft and uneven, marked with shallow craters from previous shelling. In the distance, you see a farmhouse with a large barn beside it. The officer signals for caution. That barn could be full of German troops. You approach slowly, spreading out. The farmhouse windows are dark. The barn doors hang half open, creaking softly in the breeze. A faint smell of hay and something sour wafts out. The first soldier edges to the doorway, peering inside. He stiffens. Clear, the officer whispers. The soldier swallows. Dead, he says. Inside the barn, it's dim and dusty. Straw litters the floor. Against the far wall lie several German soldiers, clearly killed hours ago. Some are slumped as if they were sitting when it happened, weapons still leaning beside them. The barn must have been shelled during the naval bombardment. It's quiet now, but the scene sends a chill through you as you leave the barn. You hear distant gunfire against short, sharp bursts. Closer this time. You follow the sound. Beyond a final stretch of hedgerow, the terrain opens into a gentle slope leading toward the main road. You can see it now, a long ribbon of dirt lined with telegraph poles. And there, dug in along the road, are German troops. Sandbags, machine guns, and even an anti-tank gun pointing back toward the beach. This is it. The position blocking your advance. The officer calls everyone in. The plan is quick and simple. Mortars will hit the position, then you'll charge across the open ground. It's risky, but there's no other way. You crouch low as the mortar crew sets up. The dull thump of the first shell echoes, then seconds. Later, an explosion blooms over the German position. Smoke and dust rise. Another shell follows, then another. Move, the officer shouts. You sprint out of the hedgerow and into the open. Your boots slip in the wet grass as you run. Bullets snap through the smoke, some dangerously close. A shell crater opens in the ground. Ahead, you dive into it for a second, then scramble out and keep going. The German defenders are disoriented from the mortar fire, but they're not broken. A machine gun opens up, cutting down to soldiers to your left. You don't stop. You reach the sandbag wall, slam into it, and immediately fire over the top. The Germans are scrambling now. One throws up his hands. Another reaches for his rifle and is cut down. Within minutes, the position is overrun. Smoke drifts lazily over the road, and the gunfire fades. You made it. The road is clear, but as you stand there, catching your breath, looking at the battered landscape, you realize this road is just one piece of the massive puzzle. There are still miles to go before you reach any semblance of safety, and the day is still far from over. You slump against a telegraph pole by the Nauseeland road, your chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. The acrid smell of gunpowder clings to everything: the sandbags, your sweat-soaked uniform, even the damp Normandy air. For a brief moment, there's nothing but the distant echo of fighting elsewhere, a reminder that this battle stretches far beyond the stretch of dirt you've just claimed. Around you, soldiers move methodically, checking for any remaining threats. The officer kneels over a captured map spread on the road. His finger traces a thin line toward another cluster of hedgerows, then toward a distant ridge where the next objective looms. "We can't hold this road alone," he says quietly. "We need to push further inland and link up with the other units." You glance down the length of the road. It stretches like a scar through the countryside, disappearing into a haze of smoke. Somewhere out there, tanks and more German reinforcements are waiting. A mainstream historical fact: by midday on June 6th, Allied troops were fighting not just for survival, but to secure a foothold large enough to bring in heavier equipment. Without that inland push, the beaches would become death traps as German counterattacks closed in. Every inch gained had to be defended with blood. Here's a quirky little tidbits: some soldiers, in the chaos of moving inland, borrowed abandoned French bicycles from barns and village squares. Picture a mud-splattered GI wobbling through a hedgerow lane on a rusty bike, rifle slung over his back, desperately trying to relay a message. Not exactly the heroic image on recruitment posters, but it happened. Historians still argue whether the Germans' slow counterattack was due to poor communication, or if Allied deception, like the fake invasion threat at Pas de Calais, actually paralyzed their decision-making. If those German reserves had moved faster, you probably wouldn't even be here breathing. You and the others start marching again. The rain has eased to a fine mist that settles on your helmet and runs down the back of your neck. Normandy's countryside unfolds in a strange mix of beauty and horror. Rolling fields of tall grass are pocked with shell craters. Stone farmhouses stand empty, doors hanging open like gaping mouths. A half-destroyed cart lies tipped on its side, its content sacks of grains build across the mud. The hedgerows close in again. Their dense greenery feels claustrophobic, like the walls of a labyrinth designed to trap you. Every turn seems to hide something. You grip your rifle tighter, stepping carefully over tangled roots. As you push deeper inland, you start to see signs of paratrooper activity. Pieces of silk parachute fabric snagged in trees, empty ammunition crates, a discarded helmet with the distinctive white spade insignia of the 101st Airborne. Suddenly, you hear voices, ahead American voices. Your officer signals for caution, then moves forward. From the hedgerow emerges a small group of paratroopers. They look exhausted, uniforms torn, faces streaked with dirt and sweat. One of them carries a makeshift map scrawled on a scrap of paper. "Thank God you made it," one of them says, relief softening his voice. "We've been holding a crossroads just ahead, but we're cut off. German patrols keep probing us. We need reinforcements." You glance at their haunted faces. These men jumped in the night before, scattered across enemy territory with nothing but what they carried. Some probably landed miles off target. You can't imagine the fear of dropping into darkness and not knowing if you'd land in a field, a river, or right in the middle of a German position. The officer nods. "We'll link up and hold it together." The combined group moves toward the paratrooper-held crossroads. It's a small cluster of stone buildings, surrounded by fields and overlooked by a tall church steeple. From a distance, it almost looks peaceful. Up close, it's clearly a fragile lifeline. Sandbags are piled at key corners, machine guns set up in windows, and foxholes dug hastily around the perimeter. As you enter, you see the evidence of last night's fight. Spent casings litter the ground. A German helmet sits on a step, a bullet hole clean through it. A paratrooper, too pale and still, lies covered with a tarp beside the church. The lieutenant in charge of the paratroopers gives a quick briefing. "They've been testing our defenses all morning. Infantry patrols mostly, but we've spotted a half-track lurking in the tree line. We expect a bigger push soon." Your squad takes up positions alongside the paratroopers. You're assigned to a window on the second floor of a farmhouse overlooking a narrow approach road. From here, you can see fields stretching to a dark tree line where the enemy is likely gathering. You settle in and wait. The silence is thick, too thick. Then you hear the distant clank of metal and the faint rumble of engines there. "Coming," someone mutters. Sure enough, through the misty tree line, shapes begin to emerge. German infantry, moving cautiously along the hedgerow edges, rifles raised. Behind them, the dark silhouette of an armored car. "Hold fire," the lieutenant says calmly. "Wait until they're in the open." Your finger hovers on the trigger, sweat slicking your grip. The enemy closes the distance, unaware they're walking straight into prepared positions. Now, gunfire erupts from every window and foxhole. The Germans are caught in the open, scrambling for cover that isn't there. Some drop instantly, others dive back toward the hedges. The armored car swings its gun toward the farmhouse and fires, blowing a chunk of wall into dust and splinters. You duck instinctively as debris rains down. Your ears ring, but you lean back into position and fire again. The fight is chaotic. Smoke and dust obscure everything. A paratrooper lobs a grenade out the window, and it explodes near the German infantry, scattering them. The armored car starts, reversing, its crew realizing they've walked into a hornet's nest. After several minutes, the gunfire fades. The Germans retreat into the trees, leaving a few motionless figures behind. For now, the crossroads holds. You climb down from the farmhouse window, your hands still trembling. The paratroopers slap you on the back, their grins weary but genuine. "Not bad," one says. "Guess you beach boys can fight after all." You manage a thin smile. It feels strange laughing, even lightly, in this ruined village with the smell of smoke and cordite still heavy in the air. But you know this is only temporary. The Germans will regroup. They'll be back with more men, maybe heavier armor, and you'll have to hold this fragile position until reinforcements push further inland. As you sip from your canteen, you look toward the church steeple, alone. Bell hangs there, cracked but still whole. You wonder if it will ever ring again, not for alarm, but for peace. Your officer checks his watch. It's still only early afternoon, he says grimly. The day feels endless, and you're nowhere near the finish line. You sit on the splintered floorboards of the farmhouse, back pressed against the cool wall, feeling the vibrations of distant artillery through your boots. Outside, the air is eerily calm for a moment. The paratroopers are reorganizing their positions, quietly swapping ammunition and checking weapons. Every face looks worn down, hollowed by exhaustion. But there's still that stubborn glint of resolve. The officer gathers you all briefly in the shadow of the church. He spreads a battered map on an overturned crate. We're holding the crossroads for now, but High Command wants this village secured completely. That means clearing the last German strongpoint beyond the fields of farmhouse, fortified as a command post. We can't move further inland until it's neutralized. You glance in the direction he points. Beyond the hedgerows and the open field lies another cluster of buildings. From here you can't see much, just the faint shape of a roofline. But you already know what's waiting: more sandbags, more guns, and more men ready to kill you before you even reach the door. A mainstream historical fact. In many parts of Normandy, German defenders turned ordinary French farmhouses into makeshift fortresses. Thick stone walls gave them natural protection, and they often had cellars stocked with supplies. Clearing these positions required brutal close-quarters combat, often room by room, wall by wall. Here's a quirky tidbit: some of these farmhouses still had livestock wandering the courtyards. Soldiers on both sides sometimes found themselves crouched behind a pigsty or milking stall during. There are even accounts of cows bolting through the middle of a battle, oblivious to the bullets whizzing past. Historians still argue whether the Allies could have bypassed many of these positions rather than engaging them head-on. Some believe bypassing would have left dangerous pockets of resistance behind, threatening supply lines. Others say it was a costly choice to fight for every single stone. The officer divides the squads. Your team will flank through the orchard on the left, while another moves straight along the lane to draw enemy fire. The paratroopers will set up a base of fire near the hedgerow. It's all coordinated on scraps of paper and hand signals. No radios here, just trust and timing. You set off through the orchard, moving quietly between gnarled apple trees. The ground is damp and soft, littered with half-rotten fruit. The sweet smell is oddly out of place, mixing with the ever-present temps of smoke and sweat. You reach the edge of the orchard and crouch behind a low stone wall. Through the gaps in the hedge, you can finally see the German-held farmhouse. It's big, 2 stories, with thick walls and a red-tiled roof. You spot sandbags in the windows, a machine gun poking out from the upper floor. There are soldiers milling around the courtyard, some smoking, others checking their rifles. The signal comes from the lane. The other squad opens fire first, drawing the defenders' attention. You hear the crack of rifles and the harsher stutter of the MG-42 replying. German shouts echo from the farmhouse. Now it's your turn. Your squad climbs over the stone wall and sprints toward the side of the building. Bullets hissed past, clipping branches and kicking up dirt. You hit the outer wall of the farmhouse, pressing yourself flat against the cold stone. Heart hammering, You edge toward a side door. The first soldier in your line kicks it open. Inside, it's dark and smells faintly of bread and damp earth. You move fast, rifle raised, clearing the ground floor room by room. Broken furniture is scattered everywhere, chairs overturned, a table splintered. In the kitchen, pots still hang from hooks, one of them filled with cold soup. A sudden movement, someone lunges from behind a doorway. Instinct takes over. You fire. The German soldier collapses, knocking over a stool. The sound echoes strangely. Through the house, upstairs, you and two others climb the creaking wooden stairs. At the top, a door is ajar. Through it, you can see the barrel of the machine gun aimed out the window toward your friends in the lane. You toss a grenade through the doorway and duck back down the stairs. The explosion rattles the whole building. Dust fills the air. When you move back up, the machine gun is silent. You secure the upper floor, stepping carefully over rubble and debris. One room still has a child's bed in it, covered with a faded blanket. You pause for half a second, imagining the family that once lived here before this war turned their home into a fortress. Back in the courtyard, the firefight is still raging. The paratroopers are laying down suppressive fire from the hedgerow, while the other squad presses in. You head to the back door and kick it open, surprising to German soldiers who were reloading. They drop their rifles instantly, hands shooting. Oop, raus, Hand, ho. One shouts, panicked. The officer motions for them to be disarmed and pushed aside. Some Germans fight to the last bullet. Others, like these two, know when it's over. Finally, after what feels like hours, the courtyard falls silent. The farmhouse is clear. You slump against the wall outside, panting. The smell of gunpowder and brick dust fills your nose. Around you, soldiers check their wounds, reload, and regroup. One of the paratroopers leans against a tree, wiping sweat from his forehead. Hell of a place for a fight, he says, glancing at the peaceful orchard nearby. You take a sip from your canteen and look around. Strewn with debris, the orchard is trampled. A chicken wanders aimlessly through the courtyard, pecking at the ground, oblivious to the carnage. The officer gathers everyone. We've secured the strong point, he says, but don't get comfortable. Intel says there's a German column forming on the other side of the ridge. We need to move before they regroup. You've grown inwardly. The thought of more marching, more ambushes, more hedgerows makes your bones ache. But there's no choice. As you prepare to leave, you glance back at the farmhouse one last time. It's silent now, save for the creak of a loose shutter in the breeze. A place that was once alive with laughter, meals, and simple routines is now just another ruin in this endless war. You shoulder your rifle and follow the squad toward the ridge. The sun is dipping lower now, casting long shadows over the fields. The day is wearing on, but the fighting isn't finished. You can already hear the distant rumble of vehicles. The next round is coming. You trudge toward the ridge, each step heavier than the last. The mud sticks stubbornly to your boots, making them feel twice as heavy. The air is thicker here, heavy with the mingled smells of smoke, damp earth, and something more metallic blood. Lingering in the soil at the crest of the ridge, you drop to your belly and peer over. Below lies a shallow valley, cut by a narrow road. And on that road, you see them, a German column moving cautiously through the bocage. Trucks loaded with infantry, a half-track bristling with a mounted gun, and, trailing behind, the unmistakable silhouette of a panzer tank. You feel a sinking dread in your gut. That tank could tear through your fragile positions like they're made of paper. The officer crouches next to you, scanning the convoy through his binoculars. They're headed straight for the crossroads we just left, he mutters. If they retake it, everything we've done will be for nothing. The decision is made quickly. You can't let them through. You'll have to ambush them here, on this narrow stretch of road. A mainstream historical fact. German reinforcements on D-Day often moved cautiously, unsure of the scale of the invasion. Allied air superiority made them vulnerable on open roads, forcing many columns to advance under cover of trees and hedgerows. Ambushes like this one became the only way for lightly armed infantry to counter heavy vehicles. Here's a quirky little tidbit. Some G is nicknamed their improvised and team's suicide squads, but they also gave them ridiculous mascot names to keep morale up. One unit called themselves the Mosquitoes because they buzzed around and bit big things that couldn't swat back. Historians still argue whether the German armored divisions could have crushed the beachhead if they'd been unleashed. Earlier on D-Day, Hitler's insistence on holding them in reserve for a direct order delayed their movement, giving you just enough time to prepare. You scrambled down from the ridge into the trees lining the road. There's no time for perfect planning. Bazookas are positioned in the underbrush, machine guns set up behind hedgerows, and grenades are distributed like candy before a storm. You crouch low, waiting, every nerve buzzing. The sound of engines grows louder. Through the leaves, you glimpse the lead truck rattling along the dirt road. Soldiers in gray uniforms sit in the back, rifles slung, looking half alert. Behind it rumbles the half-track, its gunner scanning the tree line lazily. You glance at the bazooka team. They're holding their breath, fingers twitching on the trigger. Wait, the officer whispers that the Panzer appears. Its steel hull glints in the dim light, its turret scanning ahead. It's massive, implacable. You know if it makes it past, it will crush everything you've worked to secure. Now, the first bazooka fires. The rocket streaks out with a hiss, striking the lead truck. It explodes in a fiery burst, flipping onto its side. Soldiers spill out, screaming. Chaos erupts. Machine guns open up from the hedgerows, cutting down the Germans caught in the open. Another bazooka team hits the half-track, blowing its rear axle apart. The gunner tumbles off as the vehicle skids sideways. The Panzer roars to life, its turret swiveling toward the tree line. You hit the dirt as its cannon fires. The explosion rips through a section of hedge, showering you with dirt and splinters. Take out the tank. The officer yells. Another bazooka team dashes forward, taking cover behind a tree. They aim, fire whoosh. The rocket slams into the side of the Panzer, leaving a black scorch mark, but not penetrating. The tank fires again, this time hitting the road. The blast sends shock waves through your chest. You crawl toward another position, heart pounding. A soldier nearby pulls out a satchel, charge a bundle of explosives meant for desperate close work. He locks eyes with you, a grim determination flashing there, then sprints toward the tank under covering fire. Bullets rake the ground around him, but he reaches the Panzer's track, slaps the charge onto the wheels, and dives into the ditch. A deafening blast rips through the air. The Panzer lurches, its tread blown apart. It grinds to a halt, smoke pouring from its hull. For a second, everything pauses. Then, the German infantry tries to regroup, firing wildly into the trees. You return fire, picking targets as they scramble for cover. The convoy is in burning soldiers, retreating in confusion. Within minutes, the survivors break and run back toward the safety of the bocage. The valley road is littered with wreckage, smoke curling into the gray sky. It's over. For now you step out of the trees, ears still ringing. The Panzer sits crippled in the road, its crew having abandoned it. Flames flicker from the ruined half-track. You can smell burning rubber and scorched metal. The officer surveys the scene, his expression grim. "That'll buy us some time," he says, "but they'll be back, probably with more tanks." You help move the wounded to the roadside. One soldier, pale and wide-eyed, clutches his arm, blood seeping through his fingers. A medic kneels beside him, working quietly amid the wreckage. A mainstream fact you can't escape. D-Day Day wasn't just one big battle. It was thousands of small ones, like this: hedgerow ambushes, farmhouse firefights, desperate holds at crossroads. Each tiny victory stitched together the fragile thread of the entire invasion. Nearby, you notice a small, bizarrely untouched patch of wildflowers blooming beside the road. Amid all the wreckage, they stand bright and stubborn, a strange reminder that the world beyond this war still exists. You grab a quick drink from your canteen, the lukewarm water washing down the taste of smoke. Your muscles ache, your stomach growls, but you know there's no real rest coming. The officer calls everyone back together. "We're heading further inland," he says. "There's a rail line ahead. We take it, we cut their supply route." You glance up at the ridge you came from, now quiet except for the rising smoke. The countryside beyond looks deceptively calm, dotted with trees and stone houses, but you know better by now. Every field hides danger. Every hedgerow could be the start of another ambush. And as you shoulder your rifle, you can't help but wonder, how much farther can you go before luck runs out? You march through the smoking wreckage of the ambush site, the acrid stench of burnt fuel clinging to your clothes. The silence feels wrong. After so much noise, gunfire, explosions, shouting, the sudden quiet makes your nerves hum even louder. You glance over your shoulder one last time at the crippled Panzer, its blackened hull hissing with steam. It's a small victory, but it feels hollow. Ahead lies a narrow track leading deeper inland, toward the rail line the officer mentioned. The rail line is critical. It is how the Germans move reinforcements and supplies. Cut it, and you choke their response. But reaching it means weaving through even more hedgerows and open fields. The landscape here is almost cruelly beautiful. Rolling green hills, clusters of apple trees, and quaint farmhouses, the horizon. You almost forget you're in the middle of the biggest invasion in history, and until you spot another burned out truck in a ditch or the glint of an abandoned helmet in the grass. A mainstream historical fact. The Allies needed to advance beyond the beaches quickly to prevent the Germans from organizing counterattacks. The first 24 hours of D-Day Day were a desperate race to capture key bridges, roads, and railways before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Every hour lost meant more German armor pushing toward you. Here's a quirky little tidbits: some soldiers moving through Normandy's farmland ended up eating apples straight from the trees and cider from abandoned cellars. The sweetness was a brief, surreal contrast to the fighting. One GI even wrote home saying, "It's like a picnic in hell." Historians still argue whether the Germans could have held Normandy if they'd destroyed their own railways preemptively. Some claim their reluctance to cripple their own infrastructure bought the Allies just enough time to push inland. You reach another hedgerow and crouch. Ahead lies an open pasture leading toward the railway embankment. Beyond it, you can see a small station building with a water tower rising above it. Through your binoculars, you spot movement German soldiers patrolling the area, rifles slung casually. They don't know you're here, not yet. The officer whispers the plan. 2 squads will circle through the hedgerows to flank the station, while the rest lay down covering fire from the pasture. You'll need to hit them fast before they can bring in reinforcements from nearby villages. You move quietly along the hedge, careful not to snap a twig or rustle the leaves. The earth beneath you is soft, and the air smells faintly of wet grass and hay. You hear a distant train whistle echoing a ghostly sound, like the countryside itself is mocking you. You reach the edge of the pasture. The Germans are closer now, maybe a dozen of them near the station platform. A machine gun nest is set up by the water tower, its barrel aimed lazily toward the approach road. The officer raises his hand, 3 fingers, 2, 1. The first shots crack out from your flank. The Germans scatter, shouting in alarm. You and your squad burst from the hedge, sprinting toward the station. Bullets whip past as the machine gun roars to life. Dirt kicks up around your boots. You dive behind a wooden fence, splinters flying as rounds chew through it. Grenade, someone shouts. You yank a grenade from your belt, pull the pin, and hurl it toward the nest by the water tower. It bounces once, then detonates, sending up a plume of smoke and debris. The machine gun falls silent. You push forward, heart pounding. The station building looms ahead. Germans are still firing from the windows. One soldier beside you goes down, clutching his side. You drag him into cover behind a stack of crates as a medic rushes in. The flanking squad finally hits from the other side, pinning the defenders in a deadly crossfire. You charge the station, boots slamming onto the wooden platform. Inside, the building smells of coal dust and old paper. A German officer is frantically shouting orders as he tries to radio for help. Before he can finish, a burst of rifle fire drops him. You clear the rooms quickly, offices filled with scattered papers. A ticket counter overturned, benches splintered by stray rounds. In the corner, you find a map on the wall with rail schedules and routes marked in neat German script. Outside, the paratroopers are planting explosives on the tracks. You can hear the dull, metallic clink as they work fast. The water tower groans as another charge is set at its base. Clear out, someone yells. You sprint back toward the hedgerow as the charges go off. The rail line erupts in a thunderous boom, rails twisting and snapping like brittle twigs. The water tower collapses in a slow, groaning fall, smashing into the platform. With a crash that shakes the ground, smoke fills the sky. The station is wrecked. The rail line is severed. You lean against the hedge, catching your breath. Another key objective destroyed. Another lifeline cut. But as you regroup, you hear the distant rumble of engines again, this time heavier, more deliberate. Tanks. The Germans have realized what's happening, and they're coming fast. The officer grimaces. We've got to move. If they catch us here, we're finished. You march again, this time deeper into the bocage. The sun is starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows that make every hedgerow look like a waiting ambush. The fighting has blurred into a haze of noise and fatigue, but you keep moving. Suddenly, a faint voice calls out from a ruined farmhouse nearby. You and another soldier approach cautiously. Inside, you find 2 French civilians, a man and a woman, dirt-streaked and terrified. They whisper in broken English that the Germans have a strong point ahead, dug into a small hill with bunkers and trenches. The officer nods grimly. If we're going to hold this ground, we'll have to take that hill. You glance toward the horizon. The hill is just visible, dark against the dimming light. You already know it won't be easy. Elevated positions are death traps for anyone trying to assault them. A mainstream fact creeps into your mind. Taking high ground in Normandy often cost entire platoons, but without it, advancing forces, or sitting ducks for artillery and snipers. You reload your rifle, hands moving automatically now. The day feels endless, like it's stretching into one long, unbroken moment of fear and adrenaline. As you start toward the hill, you notice the Frenchwoman handing your officer a small loaf of bread, whispering something you can't quite hear. Maybe it's a blessing, maybe it's just hope. Either way, you know you're walking into another fight. The shadows are long now. The countryside feels heavy with waiting, and somewhere ahead, the enemy is digging in. The hill looms ahead like a dark sentinel, its slopes lined with hedgerows and scattered trees. Even from a distance, you can sense the danger. Elevated ground means the Germans can see everything. Any approach is exposed. You tighten the straps on your helmet, feeling the weight of inevitability settle on your shoulders. The officer gathers you behind a hedgerow for a quick briefing. They've got bunkers and trenches dug into that hill, he says, voice low but firm. Probably machine guns covering every approach. Artillery too, if we're unlucky. We'll hit them from two sides, one squad straight up the slope as a distraction, the rest flanking through the orchard on the east. You glance at the slope again. It looks deceptively peaceful, like something out of a countryside painting. But you can already imagine what's waiting: steel, barbed wire, and men determined to hold their ground at any cost. A mainstream historical fact. Many German defensive positions in Normandy were built into natural high ground, using old farm, roads, and hills as ready-made fortresses. These strongpoints were often nicknamed mini-forts by Allied soldiers because of how much firepower they could hide in such small areas. Here's a quirky tidbit: some German positions on hills actually used fake scarecrow-like dummies in the trenches to confuse Allied snipers. From a distance, they looked like helmeted soldiers. Imagine wasting a precious round on a straw man while the real enemy watched you from another slit. Historians still argue whether Allied commanders underestimated how costly it would be to take these hilltop defenses. Some claim they assumed naval bombardments had destroyed most of them, only to discover they'd survived intact, ready to unleash hell. The signal comes. You move out quietly, skirting the edge of an orchard. The ground is damp and uneven, dotted with fallen apples squishing under your boots. The sweet smell mixes strangely with the sour stench of mud and old smoke. You reach the orchard's end and crouch behind another low wall. From here, you can see the hill more clearly. German bunkers are camouflaged with branches and netting. Trenches snake across the slope like scars. Figures move along the parapets, rifles glinting in the fading light dot. Then the distraction begins. From the west, your comrades open fire, rattling the quiet evening air. German machine guns respond instantly, muzzle flashes lighting up the slope. The rattle of MG-42s fills the valley, a harsh metallic growl that seems to vibrate in your chest. While their attention shifts, your squad makes its move. You creep along the base of the hill, hugging the hedgerow, climbing slowly upward. Each step feels heavier, each breath tighter. Halfway up, a shot rings out. One soldier ahead of you drops, clutching his chest. The rest of you dive into the nearest ditch. Sniper, someone hisses. You scan the slope, heart pounding. A faint glint in the trees there. You steady your rifle, squeeze the trigger. The sniper slumps over the trench wall, sliding out of sight. You push on, adrenaline burning away hesitation. The trench line is close now. You can hear German voices calm, confident, like they think they still have control. The officer raises his hand. 3, 2, 1. You vault over the trench, lip and drop in. It's chaos, instantly. The narrow earthen corridor echoes with gunfire. You see a German soldier just feet away, eyes wide in surprise. You fire before he can. He falls backward into the mud. The trench twists and turns like a rabbit warren. You move quickly, clearing each bend with a burst of fire. Grenades go off deeper in the line, sending up showers of dirt and shrapnel. Then you reach a bunker entrance or narrow, dark doorway reinforced with thick timber. The muffled roar of an MG-42 echoes from inside. A soldier beside you pulls the pin on a grenade and rolls it through the doorway. The explosion shakes the ground. Smoke billows out. You rush in after it, heart hammering dot inside. It's dim and cramped. A machine gun lies silent, its crew slumped over. The air is thick with cordite and dust. You move through quickly, emerging. On the other side of the hilltop dot from up here, you can see everything: the rolling fields, the distant hamlet you passed earlier, even a faint glint of the beach far off on the horizon. It's breathtaking for half a second. Then reality snaps back as another burst of gunfire rakes the slope. The main trench is still active. Germans are rallying further along the hill, shouting orders and firing blindly into the orchard below. You and your squad push along the trench line, clearing it section by section. It's close, brutal work. Bayonets flash, grenades explode in tight spaces. The smell of earth and blood is overwhelming. Finally, you reach the last stretch of trench where the German officer is shouting frantically. He tries to rally his men for one last stand. Before he can, a grenade lands at his feet. The explosion silences him and everyone near him. It's over. The hill is yours. You stand on the crest, chest heaving, and look down at the slope you just climbed. The hedgerows, now quiet, seem almost innocent again. Smoke curls from the captured bunkers. But you know this is only a small piece of the puzzle. The hill is just one strong point in a network of defenses stretching all across Normandy. The officer calls for a quick regroup. Medics tend to the wounded. Ammo is redistributed. You crouch against the cool earth wall of the trench, wiping sweat and grime from your face nearby. You spot something stranger: German soldier's helmet propped on a stick with a crude drawing of a smiling face chalked onto it. Maybe it was meant as a joke, a tiny moment of humanity in this madness. It feels surreal to see it here, in a place soaked with violence. As the sun dips lower, the sky turns a dull orange. Long shadows stretch across the fields. The fading light casts the countryside in a ghostly glow, making everything look softer, almost peaceful. But you know peace is still far away from this vantage point. You can see more movement in the distance, another village, more defensive lines, more hedgerows concealing God knows what. The officer points toward the next objective. We move before dark. We have to keep the momentum. You sling your rifle over your shoulder and take one last look at the hill. Another battle won. Another scar on the land. Then you start climbing down the far side, toward the next fight, and you wonder, not for the first time today, how much farther you can go before your luck finally runs out. You descend the far side of the hill slowly, boots sliding in the loose dirt, sweat and grime. At the base of the hill, the terrain opens into a shallow valley. Beyond it lies another village larger than the hamlet you secured earlier. Stone houses cluster around a church with a tall, slender steeple. It looks quiet, too quiet. The officer motions for everyone to halt and crouch near a hedgerow. He studies the village through his binoculars. "That's our next objective," he whispers. "We need it for the road junction beyond." He lowers the binoculars, his jaw tight. "It's likely fortified. Expect snipers in the windows, machine guns at the square, and probably mines on the approach. You stare at the village, feeling a familiar knot of dread in your stomach. Every time a place looks peaceful, it turns out to be a trap, a mainstream historical fact. Many Normandy villages became deadly strongpoints during D-Day. German defenders turned every house into a potential bunker, windows for snipers, cellars for ammo storage, and narrow alleys for ambushes. Clearing them meant brutal street to street. Imagine creeping through a strange village, spotting a hastily scrawled message on a wall, and praying it's not a trap itself. Historians still argue whether the Allies could have bypassed certain villages altogether. Some claim going around them would have saved lives. Others insist leaving fortified positions behind risked cutting off supply lines later. You start moving again. The approach to the village is a patchwork of fields and dirt paths. In the dimming light, everything seems to blur. Shadows stretch longer, and every movement makes your heart jump. Suddenly, you hear a faint metallic click ahead. Stop. Someone hisses. A soldier freezes mid-step. His boot has pressed on something buried just under the dirt. The soldier steps back, pale-faced. The mine is marked and avoided, but now you know the entire approach might be seeded with them. You edge forward more cautiously, weaving along the narrowest, safest routes. Finally, you reach the outskirts of the village. The first building you see is a stone barn, its doors slightly ajar. It's too quiet. The officer sends 2 scouts. They slip into the barn. After a tense moment, one waves you forward. Inside, it's dim and smells of hay and damp wood. There are a few abandoned tools and a half-empty feed sack, but the loft above creaks. You glance up, heart pounding, and see a shadow move. Before you can react, the shadow jumps a German soldier, rifle in hand. He lands awkwardly on the hay and tries to raise his weapon. One of your squad mates fires first. The soldier collapses. You realize this barn was an observation post. If you'd blundered past, they would have warned the others. The barn secured, you move into the village proper. Narrow cobblestone streets wind between tall, tight houses. The evening light paints everything in muted golds and grays. It would be beautiful if it weren't for the broken shutters, the doors hanging open, and the eerie silence. You edge along a wall, rifle ready. A faint sound catches your ear. German voices. They're close, maybe around the next corner. The officer signals. 2 soldiers toss grenades around the bend. The explosions echo through the alleyways. You rush forward, stepping over rubble and debris. A small German patrol lies crumpled where they stood. From the square ahead, you suddenly hear the rattle of a machine gun. Bullets chew through the stone wall beside you, sending shards flying. Sniper and MG nest. Someone shouts, "You!" Duck behind a doorway. The machine gun is set up in the upper window of the church, covering the square perfectly. You peek out and see the muzzle flash again, spraying the street. There's no way across without taking it out. A paratrooper pulls a rifle grenade from his pack, clips it on, and fires. It arcs gracefully toward the church window. The explosion blows out the stained glass, sending shards raining onto the cobblestones. The machine gun stops. Move. The sniper must be in the bell tower. You climb the narrow staircase inside the building you've entered, moving carefully. From the top floor, you can see the church steeple clearly. There's a flash of movement. The sniper leans out for another shot. You steady your rifle and fire. The figure slumps forward, tumbling from the window. With the sniper down, you push toward the church. The heavy wooden doors are barred, so you use a small explosive charge. The blast rattles the stone walls, and you rush inside. The church interior is dim, filled with drifting dust. Pews are overturned, and the air smells faintly of candle wax and smoke. At the altar, a German squad is hastily packing up maps and radios. They whirl around at the noise of your entry. A firefight erupts in the sacred space. Muzzle flashes, lighting up the stained glass shadows. The echoes are deafening. In seconds, it's over. The Germans lie still. You step to the altar and glance. At the maps, they show nearby defensive positions, fallback routes, and supply depots. Valuable intel. You hand them to the officer, who tucks them into his jacket without a word. Outside, the square is finally quiet. The village is secure. Civilians begin emerging cautiously from cellars and hidden rooms. An elderly Frenchman in a worn coat steps forward, muttering soft thanks. A little girl peeks out from behind him, holding a ragged doll. You kneel for a moment and smile weakly at her. People still here, clinging to whatever fragments of home they have left. The officer orders a quick regroup. Supplies are scavenged from the captured village ammo, food, anything useful. You grab a canteen of water from a German pack and take a long sip. It tastes metallic, but it's cold, and you're too thirsty to care. As you rest for a fleeting moment on the church steps, you hear the distant thunder of artillery. Not naval guns, this time German guns. They're shelling positions further inland. The officer looks at his watch. We have to keep moving before nightfall, he says. There's one more ridge before we can dig in for the night. You glance back at the village square. The church steeple towers over it, cracked but still standing. The sun is sinking fast, painting the sky in streaks of orange and red. Another village taken, another step forward, but the ridge ahead could be worse than anything you've faced yet. You reload your rifle, stand, and follow the others back into the growing shadows. You leave the village behind, the fading orange light casting long, eerie shadows across the countryside. The silhouettes of the stone houses and the broken church steeple shrink as you move along the narrow dirt road toward the ridge. The air is cooler now, but it carries a heavier weight, like the land itself is holding its breath. Your boots crunch softly on gravel. Around you, the hedgerows close in again, dense and silent. The only sounds are the low murmurs of soldiers, the clinking of gear, and the occasional distant thud of artillery. The officer walks ahead, glancing often at his map by the dim glow of a covered flashlight. Today, he says quietly, secure it, and we'll have a defensible position overnight. If we don't, he doesn't finish. He doesn't have to. A mainstream historical fact. Capturing and holding high ground in Normandy was critical for survival. Without the vantage points of ridges and hills, Allied forces couldn't call in artillery support or spot German counterattacks in time. Many soldiers described these last pushes before nightfall as the most desperate moments of the day. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some soldiers joked grimly that Normandy's hedgerows were designed by the devil himself, with roots so thick they could stop a tank. Engineers even improvised bulldozer-like cutters, called rhino attachments, to carve paths through them. Sadly, you don't have one of those here. Historians still argue whether the hedgerows themselves prolonged the Normandy fighting by weeks. Some say Allied planners underestimated just how much of a nightmare they'd be for advancing infantry. You reach a gap in the hedge and crouch low. Beyond it, the land opens into a shallow valley leading up to the ridge. At the top, faint in the dusky light, you can see the outline of a German defensive line, sandbags, barbed wire, and a few low, Bunkers built into the slope. They know we're coming, the officer says grimly. He points out the plan. A small mortar team will fire smoke rounds to obscure the lower slope. Then, squads will advance in staggered movements, taking cover wherever they can. It's risky, but there's no time to wait for heavier support. The mortar team sets up quickly, their hands moving in practiced motions. You hear the soft thump as the first round launches. Seconds later, a pale cloud of smoke blooms near the ridge. More rounds follow, creating a drifting curtain that partially hides the slope. Go. You rush out of the hedgerow into the open valley, boots pounding the soft ground. The fading light and the smoke combine into a hazy, surreal twilight. It's quiet for half a second. Then the ridge erupts. Machine guns open up from the bunkers, tearing into the smoke screen. Tracer rounds cut through the haze like fiery lines. Mortar whistle down from somewhere on the ridge, slamming into the valley with gut-punching explosions. You dive into a shallow crater, chest heaving. Dirt showers over you. Around you, soldiers scramble for cover, shouting to each other over the deafening noise. The officer waves his arm, signaling forward. You grit your teeth, climb out of the crater, and keep moving. The smoke helps, but not much. Bullets snap past, close enough to make your ears ring. Ahead, a hedgerow juts halfway. Up the slope, a tiny patch of safety. You sprint for it, lungs burning, and throw yourself against its roots. Nearby, a soldier is setting up a light machine gun, bracing it against the hedge. He opens fire toward the ridge, the recoil rattling his whole body. The return fire from above falters briefly. Move up, the officer yells. You crawl through the hedge and push farther up the slope. The smoke is thinning now, revealing the harsh outlines of the German positions. You can see the bunkers more clearly. Small, low concrete boxes with firing slits glowing faintly in the dim light. Barbed wire glints along the top edge. Grenades are thrown ahead to clear the path. You follow the explosions, stepping carefully, over churned earth and shattered branches. Halfway up, you hear a faint, metallic ping-a-mine. Everyone freezes. A sapper moves in carefully again, disarming it with steady hands. It takes precious minutes that feel like hours, but the mine is marked and you move on. Finally, you reach the barbed wire. It's tangled and rusted, stretched tight across the slope. A Bangalore torpedo is slid under a Tailong tube packed with explosives. You all duck back. The blast rips the wire apart, sending fragments flying. Go, go, go. You charge the final stretch. The bunkers ahead spit fire, but you're too close for them to have full visibility. You reach the first sandbag wall and vault over, rifle raised. Inside the trench line, it's chaos. German soldiers shout in panic. You fire point blank into the nearest figure, then duck as a grenade lands nearby. It explodes, filling the trench. With dust and screams, you move bunker to bunker. One is cleared with grenades, another with a flamethrower brought up from the rear. The heat from it is searing, even from a distance. Finally, you reach the main bunker at the ridge's crest. The officer pulls a satchel charge from his pack, lights the fuse, and hurls it into the firing slit. The explosion shakes the ground. The bunker goes silent, and then, just like that, the ridge is quiet. You stand on top of it, panting. The view is wide and haunting. Below, the valley you crossed is shrouded in drifting smoke, and beyond it, you can see the faint glow of the village you left behind. Farther still, faint as a memory, the shimmer of the sea. You've made it. For tonight, the officer orders positions to be set up. Sandbags are stacked, captured bunkers reinforced. Foxholes are dug along the ridgeline. It's not much, but it will have to hold. As darkness fully settles, you sit on the edge of a trench and sip the last of your water. The stars are faint through the lingering smoke. Nearby, a soldier hums quietly to himself, tune you can't place. Another is carefully cleaning his rifle by the dim glow of a flashlight. Exhaustion seeping in. A mainstream fact drifts through your mind. D-Day wasn't won in a single day. The landings were just the beginning of weeks of grinding. Relentless combat through the bocage. Here's another quirky tidbit you recall from briefings. Some soldiers swore they could hear cows mooing peacefully at night, even while artillery thundered in the distance. Life, somehow, went on around the chaos. Historians still argue whether the first day's gains were enough to call the landings an immediate success. Some say just surviving the first 24 hours was the real victory. You lean back against the dirt wall of the trench and glance toward the dark horizon. Tomorrow will bring more ridges, more hedgerows, more fights. But for now, you've secured this ground. And for the first time today, you let yourself breathe. The night on the ridge is uneasy. Darkness cloaks everything, and the silence feels like a living thing pressing against your ears. You huddle in the shallow trench you helped dig, your back resting against the cool earth. The stars are faint, blurred by lingering smoke drifting from the valley below. Somewhere in the distance, artillery thunders sporadically, low rumbles that shake the ground like the growl of some far-off beast. You can hear faint noises around you, the scraping of shovels as men deepen their foxholes, the quiet clink of ammunition being checked and rechecked, a whispered joke here and there, cut off quickly as everyone remembers how close the enemy still is. Your officer walks down the line, his face shadowed and hard. "Stay sharp," he says softly. "They may counterattack before dawn." His words hang in the cool night air. A mainstream historical fact: German forces often launched night counterattacks in Normandy, trying to reclaim lost ground before Allied reinforcements and armor could solidify positions. Many D-Day survivors described the nights as worse than the days, because, in the dark, you couldn't see what was coming, only hear it. Here's a quirky tidbit: some soldiers tied empty tin cans with pebbles inside to the barbed wire around their positions as makeshift alarms. If anyone tried to sneak through, the cans would rattle. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. Historians still argue whether the Germans missed their best chance to push the Allies back into the sea that first night. Poor coordination, scattered units, and delayed orders meant their counterattacks were piecemeal instead of overwhelming. As you sit there, clutching your rifle, you hear it. Faint footsteps in the darkness beyond the ridge. Everyone freezes. Fingers tighten on triggers. A single flare arcs into the sky, bathing the landscape in eerie white light. For a brief moment, you see shapes moving at the base of the ridge, figures slipping through the hedgerows, rifles glinting. "They're coming," someone shouts. Gunfire erupts instantly. The ridge lights up with muzzle flashes. Tracer rounds slice through the dark like angry fireflies. The Germans are trying to climb the slope, shouting to each other in harsh bursts. You press your cheek to the rifle stock and fire. The recoil is sharp against your shoulder. Through the smoke, you see a figure fall. Another scrambles for cover. A mortar round slams into the ridge, showering you with dirt. You duck, ears ringing, then pop back up to fire again. "Grenades," the officer yells. You pull the pin and lob one down the slope. It explodes in a flash, lighting up scrambling shadows. For a brief second, you catch sight of their faces, young, tired, scared. just like you. Then they're gone in the smoke. The firefight rages for what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes. The Germans push, then falter. Your squad holds the line, firing steadily, shouting to keep each other anchored in the chaos. Finally, the attack wanes. The surviving Germans retreat into the hedgerows, leaving the slope littered with still figures. Silence creeps back in. You lower your rifle slowly, your hands trembling. Around you, men breathe heavily, some muttering prayers, others just staring blankly into the darkness. The officer moves along the line, checking each position. "We held," he says quietly. "We held." You slump back against the trench wall, exhaustion washing over you. Your whole body aches. You realize you haven't eaten since before the hill assault. You fumble for a ration pack, chew mechanically on the cold, dry biscuit inside. It tastes like nothing, but it's enough to keep you going. As the adrenaline fades, the sounds of the night return. Crickets, a faint breeze, rustling the hedgerows. Somewhere nearby, a cow lets out a low, mournful moo, absurdly normal. It almost makes you laugh. You glance at the soldier next to you. He's staring at a small photograph tucked into his helmet strap, a picture of a woman smiling with 2 kids. He doesn't notice you looking. Hours creep by. The darkness seems endless. You nod off in brief, restless bursts, always jerking awake. At the faintest sound, then the faintest hint of gray appears on the horizon. Dawn. With the light comes new orders. You're to push off the ridge at first light and link up with another unit advancing from the east. Together, you'll try to break through to a key crossroads further inland. The officer points to the map. "If we take that crossroads, we can block German reinforcements moving from Cannes," he explains. His voice is calm but tight. It's critical. As the sun begins to rise, the landscape slowly reveals itself. The valley below is shrouded in mist. The village you secured the day before looks almost peaceful again in the soft morning light. You almost forget the firefight that tore through its streets hours earlier. But beyond the mist, you see movement. Trucks, more German infantry, assembling near a distant hedgerow line. "Time to move," the officer says. You climb out of the trench, your legs stiff and sore. The air is cool and smells faintly of dew, but beneath it lingers the heavier sense of smoke and earth. You shoulder your rifle and fall into formation. The march begins. Down the ridge, through the hedgerows, again, toward the unknown. The hedgerows feel endless now, a maze designed to test your patience and your nerve. Every turn could hide an ambush. Every shadow feels alive. Suddenly, a bird bursts out of the hedge, startling everyone. For a second, rifles snap up, fingers ready on triggers. Then you realize it's just a bird. A nervous laugh ripples through the squad, quickly fading back into silence. As you approach the next line of hedges, the officer raises his hand for a halt. Ahead, you hear it: vehicles, not trucks this time. Something heavier, a tank engine. You drop to your knees and peer through a gap in the hedge. Sure enough, on the road beyond, a German panzer sits idling, surrounded by infantry. They're preparing for something, maybe a counterattack toward the ridge you just left. The officer leans close. "If we can hit them before they move, we can stop them cold." You glance at the soldier carrying the bazooka. He nods grimly. The ambush will have to be perfect. You take a deep breath, steadying yourself for yet another fight. The day is barely beginning, and already the cycle starts. Again approach, ambush, assault, survive. Somewhere in your mind, the thought creeps in: how many more days like this can there be? But there's no time to dwell. On my mark, the officer whispers, the mark is coming, and once again, you prepare to throw yourself into the storm. The officer lowers his hand, and the signal is given. The ambush begins. The bazooka fires first, a sharp whoosh that cuts through the morning air. The rocket slams into the panzer's side, erupting in a bloom of smoke and flame. The tank jolts violently, treads grinding to a halt. Shouts in German echo through the hedgerow-lined road. Then the machine guns open up. From your hidden position, you and the others pour fire into the convoy. German infantry scatter, some diving behind the stalled tank, others blindly returning. Fire toward the hedge. Bullets tear through the greenery, snapping branches and showering you with bits of leaves. You hug the dirt and fire in controlled bursts. The chaos is immediate, raw, and deafening. A mainstream historical fact. German tanks like the Panzer IV and occasional Tigers were terrifying to face on foot. Infantry squads had to rely on bazooka, satchel charges, or air support to have any hope of neutralizing them. Close ambushes like this were often the only way to even the odds. Here's a quirky tidbit: some GIs called their bazookas stovepipes, joking that they were carrying around giant bits of kitchenware. A few even painted cartoon faces or names on the tubes for luck. Historians still argue whether the German armored units were truly delayed by Allied deception operations, or if they were simply paralyzed by confused command chains. Either way, this delay has bought you the sliver of opportunity you're exploiting right now. The Germans try to regroup, setting up a machine gun behind the disabled tank. One soldier, braver or more desperate than the rest, climbs the panzer's hull and aims a rifle toward your hedge. The bazooka team reloads fast. Another whoosh. The second rocket hits the panzer squarely on the turret. This time the explosion is final. The tank belches black smoke, flames licking out of the hatches. With their armored cover gone, the German infantry falter. Some break and run down the road. Others stay and fight, their fire growing more scattered as they lose cohesion. Push them, the officer yells. You surge out of the hedge, sprinting toward the road. The ground is soft with churned mud, slippery under your boots. You reach the wrecked panzer and take cover behind its smoldering hull. The heat radiates off the metal in waves. From here, you fire at the remaining Germans, scrambling in the open. A few surrender, dropping their rifles and raising their hands. Others fight until they're cut down. Within minutes, it's over. The road is littered with wreckage-burning vehicles, discarded weapons, bodies lying still in the morning mist. You catch your breath, leaning against the warm, smoking panzer. Around you, soldiers move quickly, collecting weapons and ammo from the fallen, checking the road for any intel or hidden traps. The officer points to a map again. This convoy was heading toward the crossroads. If we get there before the reinforcements, we can hold it. That's our next move. You wipe sweat and grime from your face. The crossroads. Always another target, another point on the map you're expected to reach. You move out again, down the wrecked road, past the ruined tank and the hedgerows that still hide so much. The terrain shifts as you get closer to the crossroads. The hedgerows open into wider fields, dotted with low stone walls and a few scattered barns. You spot the crossroads in the distance, just an intersection of two narrow country roads, but strategically vital. If the Germans hold it, they can funnel reinforcements toward the beaches. If you hold it, you can cut them off. Through your binoculars, you see German soldiers already there, setting up machine guns behind sandbags. A truck unloads more troops. It's a well-prepared position. The officer kneels, sketching a rough plan in the dirt. We'll hit them from 2 sides. Smoke, cover again. Bazooka on the truck first. Then we clear the buildings near the junction. The mortar crew sets up quickly. You wait in tense silence. Then the first smoke rounds thump out, landing round the crossroads and throwing up thick, white clouds. Move. You rush forward across the open field, half blinded by the drifting smoke. Bullets crack through the haze, some close, some farther away. You can't see the defenders, but you can feel their presence. A burst of fire from a hidden MG rips through the smoke. One soldier near you goes down instantly. You dive behind a low stone wall. Bazooka now. Someone shouts, "Dot the bazooka." Team fires. The rocket streaks into the parked truck, detonating it in a massive fireball. Shrapnel rains down, and the machine gun fire falters. You seize the moment and sprint toward the nearest building, at the crossroads a small stone farmhouse. You kick in the door and burst inside. The interior smells of damp wood and fear. A German soldier whirls around, rifle half raised. You fire first. He collapses onto a table covered with maps and ration tins. Upstairs, more movement. You toss a grenade into the hallway. The explosion shakes the floor. When the dust settles, the upper floor is clear. Outside, the fight intensifies. More German troops pour fire from behind sandbags. A paratrooper beside you sets up a light machine gun in a window and opens up, raking their positions. Slowly, you push them back. Grenades arc over walls. Smoke drifts through the square. Shouts in English and German mix into a chaotic roar. Finally, you reach the main machine gun nest. A well-aimed grenade silences it. The remaining defenders, seeing the position collapsing, break and run toward the hedgerows. The crossroads is yours. You stand in the middle of it, panting. 4 roads stretch away in all directions, lined with hedgerows and ditches. It doesn't look like much, a simple, rural intersection, but you know how important it is. Your officer surveys the scene. "We hold here," he says. "Reinforcements are on their way. If we keep this juncture, they can push deeper inland tomorrow." You slump against a wall, chest heaving. Around you, soldiers set up defensive positions, sandbags, machine guns. CAPTURED, German weapons repurposed. Medics move among the wounded. A local farmer emerges from a cellar nearby, looking cautious but relieved. He mutters something in French you don't understand, then offers a bucket of water. You take a sip. It's cool, clean, almost shocking after the metallic taste of your canteen. You glance at the ruined truck, the scorched panzer, the empty road now silent, except for the occasional distant boom. A mainstream fact comes to mind. Holding crossroads like this was essential for linking beach forces with airborne units and armor divisions. Without them, the invasion could stall. And here's a quirky tidbit: some soldiers marked secured crossroads by tying their unit patches to signposts like makeshift flags. A strange, almost childlike gesture in the midst of war. Historians still argue whether these small, gritty fights were the true turning point of Not the grand beach landings, but the relentless inland skirmishes that broke German mobility. You sit on the edge of the crossroads, rifle across your lap, and watch the sun climb higher. The day feels like it's been a lifetime already, but you know it isn't over. Not yet. The officer looks toward the horizon. "Tomorrow, we push toward the main road to Cannes," he says quietly. You take a deep breath, feeling the weight of what still lies ahead. For now, you've won another small piece of ground, but beyond this crossroads, the war stretches on. You sit at the edge of the captured crossroads, rifle resting loosely in your hands. The afternoon sun hangs low, bleeding a muted gold across the hedgerows. For a brief moment, there's an odd sense of calm. You can hear birds again, faintly, and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It feels wrong, like the land is trying to pretend nothing happened here, like the smoke and blood soaking into the dirt never existed, but you know better around you. The squad fortifies the junction. Sandbags are stacked. Captured German weapons are repositioned. Foxholes are dug along the edges of the road. Everyone moves with quiet efficiency, but you can see the fatigue in their faces. The 1,000-yard stares that linger a little longer with every passing hour. The officer crouches over a map spread on the hood of a captured German truck. "We hold until nightfall," he says. "Then we dig in. If reinforcements reach us by morning, we can link with the push toward Cannes." You glance toward the horizon. Beyond the hedgerows, beyond the quiet farmhouses, lies the city of Cannes. Major objective of the invasion. Taking it would mean breaking the German defensive line in Normandy, but right now feels impossibly far away. A mainstream historical fact. Cannes was supposed to be taken on D-Day itself, but ended up being one of the hardest fought objectives of the entire Normandy campaign. The hedgerows, German reserves, and brutal counterattacks turned what was planned as a swift advance into weeks of grinding attrition. Here's a quirky tidbit: some soldiers, after securing villages or crossroads like this, scrawled chalk graffiti on walls, things like "Kilroy was here," or jokes about how much they hated hedgerows, even in the middle of chaos. Humor was a shield against the weight of it all. Historians still argue whether the failure to capture Cannes on day one was a flaw in planning or just the brutal reality of underestimated German defenses. As you rest, a runner arrives from the rear lines, breathless. "Word is, German armor is regrouping," he says. "They might counterattack tonight." The officer nods grimly and relays orders. Everyone doubles their efforts. Machine gun nests are reinforced. Mines are set along the approaches. The crossroads becomes a small fortress, ready to absorb another wave. As the sun begins to sink, the golden light turns to gray. Shadows lengthen. The hedgerows grow darker, more ominous. You feel the tension building like a storm in the air. Then you hear it, faint at first, but growing clearer. Low rumble of engines, tanks. Everyone snaps to readiness. Rifles are loaded, bazookas positioned. Breath comes shallow and quick. The first German vehicles emerge from the hedgerows, a half-track, followed by infantry. Then a tank, its silhouette dark against the dimming sky. They're coming straight for the crossroads. The officer raises his hand. "Hold." The Germans advance closer, cautious but confident. Now, the first bazooka fires, striking the half-track in the lead. It erupts in a plume of flame, blocking the road. German soldiers scatter, shouting orders. The second bazooka hits the tank, but it only scorches the armor. The Panzer's turret swings toward your position. Take cover. The tank fires. The shell slams into a nearby farmhouse, blowing it apart in a shower of debris, dust, and smoke. Choke the air. Machine guns from your defensive line open up, cutting down German infantry trying to flank. Grenades arc over the sandbags, detonating in the road. The air is a wall of noise, shouts, gunfire, explosions blending into one endless roar. You crouch behind a wall, heart pounding, and lean out to fire at the advancing troops. A German soldier dives for cover but doesn't make it. Another tries to set up a machine gun and is dropped instantly. The Panzer lumbers forward, unstoppable. One of your squad mates sprints out from cover with a satchel charge, weaving through gunfire. He reaches the tank's treads, slaps the charge, and dives for cover. The explosion rips the treads apart, freezing the tank in place. Its turret swivels one last time, then falls silent. With their armor halted, the Germans falter. You press the advantage. More grenades, more gunfire. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, they break. The survivors retreat into the hedgerows, disappearing into the night silence. You lower your rifle slowly, chest heaving around you. The crossroads is a ruin, burning vehicles, shattered walls, and soldiers slumped in exhaustion. The air is thick with smoke and the acrid stench of gunpowder. The officer walks down the line, voice quiet but firm. "We held," he says. "We hold until morning. Reinforcements will link up by then." You sit on the edge of a foxhole, too tired to even speak. Someone hands you a canteen. You drink greedily, the water washing down the dust in your throat. As the darkness deepens, you realize it's finally quiet. Not just the lull between fights, but truly quiet. You can hear the faint chirp of crickets again, the soft rustle of wind through the hedges. A mainstream fact lingers in your mind. By the end of D-Day, the Allies had gained a fragile foothold. Not the sweeping victory promised in briefings, but enough. Enough to survive the night and bring in more. Here's one last quirky tidbit. Some soldiers claimed that after surviving the first 24 hours, they started carrying small lucky charms, coins, playing cards, even pieces of Normandy. Hedgerow, twigs. Anything to remind themselves they'd made it this far. Historians still argue what defined success on DID. Was it taking the beaches? Was it pushing inland? Or was it simply surviving the first day at all? You stare up at the sky. Stars begin to pierce the smoke. You're alive. You've made it through the beach, the bunkers, the hedgerows, the ambushes, and the counterattacks. Your uniform is torn and filthy. Your hands ache, your mind is numb, but you're here, the ridge. The crossroads there, yours. For tonight, at least, and in this fleeting calm, you finally let your eyes close, if only for a moment. Tomorrow will bring more hedgerows, more ridges, more crossroads, but for now, you breathe. So now, as you rest on the quiet crossroads under the faint Normandy stars, let's slow everything down. The gunfire has faded into memory, and the rumble of tanks is only an echo. You're surrounded by silence, broken only by the soft rustling of hedgerow leaves and the distant call of an owl in the dark. The earth feels cool beneath you. You can still smell the smoke, but it's faint now, dissolving into the damp night air. You breathe deeply, letting the adrenaline ebb away. Your arms feel heavy, but no longer tense. The weight of the rifle across your lap softens, becoming just another part of you. The breeze drifts across the ridge, gentle and slow, carrying with it the faintest hint of the sea far behind you. Somewhere beyond this moment lies more fighting, more marching, more endless hedgerows, but not right now. Right now, you've survived the impossible through the chaos of the beach, the tunnels of bocage, the hidden bunkers, the villages and ridges. You've done what so many couldn't. As you sit there, you think about how strange it all is that the same ground that saw such violence can be so calm, almost tender, in the quiet of night. The stars above have seen it all before. Countless wars, countless soldiers like you. They don't judge, they just shine faintly, like tiny candles in the darkness, and you let yourself exhale. Slowly the night deepens. The hedgerows fade into shadows. The crossroads feels distant now, like it belongs to another world entirely. You close your eyes. You've made it through D-Day, and for now you can rest.